Hey everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Sleeping Grush Podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm John.
Hello, John.
Hi, Matt.
And we're here to bring you all the goodness that is DGS. Today we're going to start with, we just came back from ReaperCon and Nova. It was an amazing experience because it's the first time we've been able to...
To be fair, the Nova Open.
The Nova Open, right.
There's a lot of Novas out there.
There's a lot of Novas, right? There's a supernova.
It does stand for Northern Virginia.
Yes.
Some of our
colleagues. But in Washington, D.C. this time. So
yes, true. Northern Virginia-ish.
Right, adjacent. So we sent a crew to both of these events because they happen to be on the same weekend, and both of them speak our language as a company. The Nova Open is a miniatures wargaming convention, and ReaperCon is a miniatures painting convention, so we fit in very well in both places. So we sent a crew to both, which is the first time we've been able to do that. It was quite the learning experience. I think everybody had a good time in both, but there's definitely some lessons learned and some things we're going to employ when we come about to making decisions next year. So it was an interesting time. If you guys met us at ReaperCon or Nova, welcome. We're really, really glad you're with us. We've seen Discord just absolutely blow up in the last week. There's so much stuff going on there, and a lot of it's down to you new players. So thank you very much for joining us. So today's podcast is brought to you by Cardboard Corner. We're very, very happy that Cardboard Corner has given us a space, this lovely room that we're sitting in that you can't see yet is there. That's right, yet is their fantasy room where they put RPG players, and they've lent us that space for a couple of hours on Tuesday afternoons to come and record. We're very, very thankful that they're sponsoring us in such a way. Cardboard Corner is the premier place in Kansas City to have an eat, have a drink, and play a board game. And they're right next door to Tabletop Game and Hobby, which is our flagship FLGS. So pretty awesome. Great place. If you're in town, make sure you stop by there. Today's topic is going to be the history of the company. That's something that our Patreon subscribers wanted to hear about. And if you want to know more about our Patreon called The World of Phelan, you can go to www.patreon.com/DGSgames, where you'll find 4 different subscription areas that you can get into, starting at $3 a month, which is pretty awesome. And it'll open you up to polls and all sorts of other sneak peeks and goodies that you get as a subscriber. One of those polls that we gave to our world builders, our highest subscriber, asked what they wanted to hear about on the podcast. And one of the main things that they talked about was the history of DGS games. So since I kind of came in the middle of all of that, the ancient history of the company
I see how it's going to be.
is going to kind of come down to John. So John, why don't you tell us about how DGS got started?
Okay, before I start, one thing we do want to highlight about ReaperCon and Nova, I think you might want to talk to is the number of and quality of the entries in the Master Series painting.
Yeah, let's do that.
Right, real quick.
Sure. So for those of you that aren't familiar with ReaperCon, they have the MSP Open every year, and that is their painting contest. And my gosh, it's just the talent goes into it. It's just ridiculous.
True.
We have been sponsoring awards in the MSP Open now for 4 years, I believe.
3 or 4 years, yeah. Manufacturers Awards.
Manufacturers
DGS
Awards. So to get one of those, you have to enter a DGS figure into the MSP, and not only will you be judged by the MSP judges, but then members of the company come around and they also judge those particular DGS figures. And this year we had 19 entries, which was phenomenal. It was way more than double on last year. In fact, I think it was almost triple on last year's. And the quality of those entries.
Yeah, both the number and the quality.
Fantastic.
You had a hard time choosing.
It was ridiculous, right? So I and Jennifer Felix went over and we took almost 2 hours going through the different entries, and we had to pull them out. We had to compare. We had to do some real soul searching to get who was going to win. And my gosh, they were just beautiful. And we have those splashed up on our social media pages, on Free Blades Players on Facebook, and on the World of Phelan Discord, if you haven't seen them yet, that have the winners on there. and it'll have pictures of the figures so that you can gawk at them. But everybody did a fantastic job. They were all beautiful. I'd love to be able to give out medals to everybody. However, that's obviously not how the system works. But next year we want even more. So if you're heading to ReaperCon, or
make Matt's job harder next year. That's what we're asking for.
Make my job harder next year. If you're heading to ReaperCon or thinking about heading to ReaperCon, it's well worth it, number one. Number two, bring your DGS figures and enter them in that painting contest. Not only will you get constructive feedback from the judges, but you obviously have a chance at taking home one of our Master Crafter coins if you enter a DGS figure.
And something from Reaper as well, just a gold, silver, bronze, or honorable mention from the convention staff. So.
Yeah, and it was great. So we also had figures in the Nova Open Capital Palette painting contest this year, and we'd love to see some more next year there as well too.
Absolutely. So I've delayed talking about the history of the company long enough.
You've done a really good job of that.
So, and for those listeners that don't know me yet, my name's John Cleaves. I'm the CEO of the company. You'd think it stood for Chief Executive Officer, but we all know it stands for Commercial Equipment Operator. I drive the truck. Julie's really the boss. I think we all know that. And it's also a penance for having been around the company this long. It's not a reward. So, but we have been asked several times, and when we talk to the World Builders and Change Seekers, our Patreon subscribers, about what to do with our podcast subjects early on, background of the company was high on the list.
It was real high.
And I've been thinking about it because Matt and I have talked about it. I've been thinking about how to answer this question. Do everybody justice. Don't take too long. Hit the highlights. What are the highlights? The first thing I'd like to say is, if you're out there and you're thinking about starting your own game company, let me talk you out of it first, right? Because there's challenges and you want to be ready for them before you take it on. Don't just dive off the deep end. I think it's easier today, actually. There was no Kickstarter when we started. No, crowdfunding platforms. And maybe that makes it, I think it makes it easier from my perspective, because a lot of the things that it does for you, we didn't have. We had to do it on our own.
And we've seen an awful lot of game companies sprout up since the advent of Kickstarter. So I think
the number is significant. Yeah, significant. So back in the mists of time, I've been a gamer my whole life since I was 10 years old. But in the middle of that time, I was a freelance playtester. I would work for different companies trying to break their games, generally getting rewarded not with money but with goodies. One company gave you one of everything they made if you kept your playtest current, the work current. You reported on the new things that were coming out, gave it a real shake, and there were different levels based on how hard you worked. So in about 2005, I was part of a group of friends playtesting a certain game, and after the end of a playtest session, we were all sitting around talking, and the general talking and drinking also.
Well, of course.
So yeah,
as we are today.
So it was fueled by inhibitions were low. Let's just put it that way. So we were kind of talking about the fact that we were doing this work on behalf of someone else, and wouldn't it be interesting to take the experiences of the people in the room and do it for ourselves? And so we agreed to have dinner together a week later, and gather in a room, and ask each other hard questions about whether this is something we really wanted to do, and divide up the work, and divide up the work logically. Somebody with legal experience was going to handle all legal things. Somebody who had run a business before was going to handle business things. We didn't have any artists. We didn't have any sculptors. So
seems like a gap there.
Yeah. So that's a challenge. But at first, we didn't know that we were making we didn't know for sure what kind of game we were making, but that early on. And so for several years, we kind of dabbled with it. That same group of 8 people. Not going to go into all the details of years and months and stuff, but we dabbled with it for a long time, and finally decided that we were going to make a role-playing game, and then began the process of writing the rules, play testing, developing what was going to go in the starter package, building a website, all that stuff. Kind of the last minute, relative to when we actually released, the then CEO came to me and said, I think we've been doing a lot of market research, looking into the background, we had a lot of conversations about it. We want to take a look at changing to a skirmish game, and decided to do that instead. And there was a lot of good reasons for it, but it was a last minute switch relative to when we were kind of projecting to be done. And some of the, I'll give you one example. There's a lot of examples. I'm going to give you one example about how that impacts your Free Blades play today, because I think people are interested in that.
Right.
At the time, we had intended Bright Sword to be our product, and the Fiend of the Forest adventure, which you can find on World Anvil, our section of the World of Phalon on World Anvil, was going to be our intro adventure. And we made our original models were either models from that adventure or one per then faction, because there's more now, right? Right. One per country, basically, to get the look. The merchant is a Semidian. The
which we still
hunter,
haven't brought out.
Right. Oh yeah. Right. Which we still haven't brought out. Right. Because we keep having great ideas and
right.
Helpful things from our players, but that just gives us an opportunity to bring it out.
That's right.
The bounty hunter is a Varkralin. We don't have the Varkralins out yet. More on that later. Not today. Not today. And of course some of the iconic people that we have in play today. And so the CEO said, "Okay, we want to make a skirmish game." Took a look at how to release it. Talked about 4 factions. The mission back to me, because I was just a designer then. I wistfully think about that part of the time. Not
driver.
True now. Yeah. We make 4 factions out of the models we currently make, so that we have to make the least number of models to release the 4 factions from where we are now. So that is why Black Rose, Trillians, Grular, and Herodel were the first 4, because they were, besides the Grular, the other 3 featured prominently in the original starter adventure.
The Fiend of the Forest.
The Fiend of the Forest. And then Grular. So we needed a 4th faction. We had a couple of models that tested out we had the least of them of any, right, that we had to go to get to make a starter box.
Right.
And that's why there is a Chakram in the Black Rose Bandit box, and that is why there's a Godaro in the Grular box. Now, we didn't make up, we already knew that Demons and Grular were going to have a relationship because of the Brightsword War story, which we're going to start telling here soon. And we knew that all kinds of backgrounds or factions found themselves in bandit groups.
Right.
So there was no reason not to have a Chakram and a Black Rose. But it did kind of, bear on those choices. And so we released those 4 factions in 2012 because of that. And then over the course of the next few years, we ran Kickstarters to introduce new factions to the game. Eventually, we'll run 8. All factions except for Thraken Sword, the Fire Dragon. A separate Kickstarter, but 7 Kickstarters, each introducing a new faction to the game, starting with Urtigar. Urtigar, like 2 months after we released, we were in the hotel at Gen Con 2012 watching the funding rise of the Urtigar Kickstarter.
That's awesome.
We had just released in June, so that was high adventure. No idea what we're doing, pull the trigger, sounded great, funded, pulled it out. We already had the Bear Mystic, I think. Bear Mystic, Boar Warrior. No, we had the Boar Warrior art. And we'd always kind of thought of them as our next one. And the Bear Mystic, or the Snake Mystic, was a player in the Fiend of the Forest, but we didn't end up using Tribes of Omen. We went Tribes of Valor first. So then there are those interesting years where it's a Kickstarter a year. We're going to initially Origins, Gen Con, and Adepticon. That changes to ReaperCon, Gen Con, and Adepticon at some point. And over the course of that time, the original 8 members dealt with new jobs, new children, new marriages, new divorces, new locations, moving to new places. And the strain on a person's ability to have a day job, like we all do, right?
Right.
And work this company is tough. It's tough on us,
Yes,
right?
Very.
Very difficult. It's a big challenge. And so eventually, for various reasons, all those people who are all still very good close friends of mine, I had lunch with one of them today, in fact. Moved on to other things. Now, in there, right, in those challenging times, we meet Julie Price, right? Now the real boss.
Now the boss.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's just make it clear that she's the boss. Well, she's not here to say she's not. Yeah.
Right. And nobody believes her when she does.
No, really. Why would they? But no, producer doesn't even believe.
No, producer Jager, who we did not introduce when we
not?
started because I'm an idiot.
You
Yes,
are an idiot.
it is
Okay.
my fault.
Let's knock that out right now.
Jager Madsen is producing for us today, and we really appreciate his efforts on getting us up to date on all of the technology and everything. And John just looked to him to ask
To verify that Julie is the boss.
And he knows. He's very aware.
It's a
just
big
like everybody
nod.
else
Get
is
a big
aware.
nod. Yeah, which is really nice of him considering we're having a scotch, but he's not allowed to have anything to drink until after we're done. With
Also
this
my idiocy.
That wasn't idiocy. That's good forethought.
Right.
Safety first.
Safety third.
So anyway, in the I want to say 2014 time. I'd have to ask her to be sure, but I think it's the fall of 2014. Julie walks into Tabletop 2, right? This is Tabletop 4.
Right.
The store has moved around Kansas City. Looking for a game she could play with her son. Ran into one of our demos. The then CEO gave her a demo. She and her son fell in love with the game. She became part of our friends group. Now she's one of my best friends in the whole world, you know. So as folks had to leave the company, Julie said, you know, what's your plan? I mean, so-and-so's leaving, so-and-so's leaving. I said, probably going to have to shut it down.
Yeah.
You know, I can't do it all by myself. Don't want to do it all by myself, right?
It's a lot more effort than we have.
Want to, but I couldn't.
Sure.
And she said, well, I don't know anything about games. You're not a big gamer. She wanted to play games with Jacob and, you know, have something they can do together. And I don't write fiction. But these numbers things, these money things, these business sales things, that I can do. She's a financial analyst for a big company.
Which are really kind of important to a business.
Kind of important. And so she said, if I helped you, would you be able to keep it going until we could recruit more people? And I said, I believe so. Let's give it a try. And she, you know, God bless her, she rolled up her sleeves and she saved us. There would not be a DGS the way it looks today without Julie Price. No way. Okay. So I can't thank her enough. But obviously, I don't miss an opportunity to.
That's right.
Like I just did. So it's just Julie and I. And over the course of the next several years, we will recruit Matt,
Yep.
Jennifer, Felix, Colin, Jeff, and then what's the other guy's name?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, he does something with models.
Is something.
Matt Green. Yeah.
2/3.
Okay, 2/3. Yeah, 2/3. And Matt Green. So each bringing, you know, interest in the game already, skills that are useful to, I mean, amazing skills that are useful to the game. Colin and Jeff brought, you know, design ability into us so we could open new game lines and avenues.
They came to us at a time where we
Matt,
really needed that.
you know, I don't have to, in fact, not only do I not have to guide Matt into what to write about Phelan, I have the opposite problem. Yeah, keep stealing my Phelan from me.
He has to kind of tie me down and rein me back in.
Tickling. So, but one interesting story along the way that happened before the advent of these fine folks was the interesting moment where we decided to Phelan in the first place.
Ah, yeah.
Right?
So let's talk about Phelan.
Everybody always asks about that, so I did want to get to that part as part of this.
Good. I was going to bring it up.
Yeah. So we did not know at the time when we started talking about doing this. We decided to do miniatures first over board games or anything else. We were all miniatures gamers. We weren't sculptors or artists, but we knew miniatures games. And then the big question was, do we start with science fiction or do we start with fantasy? Okay, or something else. And we decided not to do historical because we wanted to own the IP. Right. If we were going to be kind of amateurs, people who weren't sculptors or weren't artists, and somebody found a way to make a better Panzer IV, people were going to buy their Panzer IV, their Sherman tank, their old guard infantry from the Napoleonic Wars, their trireme, you know.
It's hard to put a copyright on that.
We can't. You can't. So, so we decided to do fantasy or science fiction. We had discussions, long discussions about which one to do first. And then the group met to decide in our massive underground conference room.
The bunker.
John's basement. So we, on a beautiful day, I remember it very well, and we had a long discussion, and then the guy who was the CEO at the time took a straw poll which we should have gone to last night, by the way, immediately. That was a big mistake on my part. Separate subject, though. And said, hey, let's see this is what we're going to do. We're going to see where we're at. The grill's hot. It's a beautiful day. We're going to grab some lunch. Let's take a quick straw poll, use the lunchtime, have a Coke or a beer, have a burger to talk about it, what the results are, and then come back and take our formal vote and just go final, because we need to move on and do this. So we had a big discussion, sat around, got to that point, took a straw poll. We went around the table. By the time it got to me, I was last, just because of the way the order we were sitting in. And it was 7 votes science fiction, and I voted for fantasy. And then so it was pretty clear what we were going to be doing. And we just said, okay, we're going to discuss that and have something to eat, and then we're going to come back. So we hung out, we talked about whatever. I came back and sat down, and I said, okay, I think we're ready. Or John said, we're going to have a real vote here. Is there any more discussion to be had? And but he said, but before we do that, I have to know, there were 2 Johns, this other guy and me. So I have to know what John, meaning me, was thinking when he saw, it being 7-0 when it got to him, science fiction. Why would he vote fantasy in that case? I mean, just to be,
you could have easily
I just be myself, right? And that's his eyes. Maybe he's just being himself, but I think there's probably more going on there. I just want to hear it. And I said, look, I like both ideas. I do. I'm going to be the primary designer of either one. I'm excited about either one. The difference is, if we do fantasy, we already have an established background to build from, which is my old high school, college role-playing background. The whole world, languages, nations, stories, all that was sitting there. If we do science fiction, we've talked about what it is we want to do, but we have nothing. So we're talking about a 2-year add-on before we can really get rolling to get all this background written at the rate we're doing it when it's on our day jobs. I'd like to do it sooner over later. So it's a little bit of a discussion. We took the formal vote, 8-0 fantasy. Here we are.
And here we are.
Here we are. So, and I'm glad of it, for a lot of reasons. Now I look back on it, science fiction's hard. I mean, science fiction is, you get to see whether you're right or not if you do it near in. Right. And if you do it far out, you got to make some really big leaps, right. And so it's a tricky place to play in. And there's people with very definite opinions about what they're, when it comes to science fiction and miniatures, what ought to be going on. And if you choose not to do that, you're running uphill. So I'm glad we made that decision.
Me too.
So we brought on, Julie and I recruited each of the other 5 people that are on the team now. There's 7 of us that are members of DGS. And I couldn't ask for a better crew of people to work with. I'm not just saying it because Matt's here and Jacob's a witness, but
you can't see it, but I'm wagging my finger at him.
Even tense, we had a tense moment last night in one of our business meetings, kind of a miscommunication over something. Even then, that other groups wouldn't have handled that as well. We got right after it. We know what we got to do to fix it. No big deal. Nobody's mad at anybody. Nobody did anything wrong, and so it's just a pleasure. And when it goes right, it's awesome.
We work remarkably well together.
It's crazy, So I'm very appreciative of that. So we, between 2012 and 2017, 2018, somewhere in there, we did 8 Kickstarters total. And from then till now, we are, funding our models with the money we make from them and not crowd sourcing. We may go to back to crowdsourcing for a couple of key projects coming up. We don't know yet.
It's a great tool.
It is a great tool. It can't be overlooked. I did prefer the days when it was for creators and not sometimes a pre-order system for larger companies, but we're not going to point you.
Yeah.
And then this crew of people is going to take us into the, our next phase. Like Matt said, we came out of Reaper Nova. We're kind of a different feel.
Completely different feel.
Number of people chatting, number of regions, connecting with someone who's already there, like a newer player saying, oh, I'm in such and such town.
Yeah.
A very special campaign this fall.
Yes.
It's exciting times.
Yeah, it is exciting times. Can I rewind you just a little
sure,
bit?
Yeah.
Tell me about where Free Blades came from, the name Free Blades.
Oh, the name Free Blades.
Right.
Like,
we'll talk about
it's
Brightsword as well.
It's a contest winner.
Right.
Right, yeah. So we had, when we decided to make a skirmish game, we had been toying around. We've been playing Chainmail, the new version. It was a chainmail that led to D&D back in the 70s. D&D resurrected the name. Wasn't the same game, obviously. Where you could play with metal miniatures in the D&D backgrounds.
Right.
In early 2000s, right? And it died. A new CEO came on board, so I'm not making enough money out of this particular line, so it went away. So we were left without our fantasy skirmish game. So we wrote a set of rules amongst us that we were knocking around. We called Sword Clash. It was kind of a placeholder. That's where we started. It was briefly called Pirates of Phelan, because we were going to have it more at sea than it is now. We're going to go there, but we decided not to go there first. Right. And so we decided to keep it for just a lot of reasons. And of course, any business has got to have the balance between design and development. Designer like me, I'll take a hit, have a vision. Oh, I want a game box. It's like got 500 jillion components, and it only costs the player $10. And the developer comes in and goes, "You are high, and that's not going to happen. So the box has to be so big, has so many components in it. You've got so much time to do it." So there's a practical aspect to the vision, and they got to meld.
I feel seen.
Right? Yes, you should. I feel dirty. So, so we had the name Pirates of Phalanx. We saw it, but we knew that we're going to, for practical reasons, an initial at-sea game with these models wasn't going to be practical. So we decided to go take them onto the land, but what were we going to call them? Mercenaries, right? So we had a contest, a naming contest, and Jason Condon, one of our friends here in KC, won it, and that's where the name comes from. For the skirmish game.
Right. And how about Brightsword? Brightsword's
totally
our RPG.
Story. Right, yeah.
Let's talk about Brightsword.
So, sure. So, in 19... I'm going to date myself.
It's going to be awesome.
Before Jaeger was born, right? In 1982, I was playing D&D, like a lot of people. I had been. I was the original White Boxer from when they first came out. I'm that old. And I was in college. Well, I wasn't in college technically, but it was my post-secondary education. And my favorite game company, Simulations Publications Incorporated, bear with me, I'm telling a story, right? I'll bring it all around, I promise, was failing. They were all genius designers who were cranking out designs too fast, obviously, for their business model to sustain. They took a loan and defaulted on it. And the loan was with TSR, the original maker of D&D, right? And so TSR now owned all their IP. Some of it was a challenge to them, like Dragon Quest, Campbell, Dragon Quest and D&D out there. So Dragon Quest got shoved into the, reprint the book every 7 years so it stays theirs.
Right.
But, 5 copies.
Not doing anything of it.
Whatever, yeah. So, and what they did with some of the more popular titles in the SPI line was just awful. And I was really, really angry. It wasn't TSR's fault. I was a kid. I was 20-something. But I was blaming them. Really, I should have blamed the people who were doing the books at SPI, 33rd Street, New York City. But I took it out on TSR. I said, while that company owns that property, I will never buy another D&D product or play D&D again. Promise I kept. Right? So that, but I already also had all my changes to the 2 role-playing games I played, D&D and Rollmaster. And so I had all these books, like all of us did. We had all these books, right. We made all of these changes to the rules. And one of my buddies said, you got enough material there. Why don't you write your own role-playing game? Boom. So
Challenge
I did.
Accepted.
Right. 2 things happened. I couldn't play D&D anymore. I get all this stuff. Might as well make my own. And the players, the buddies of mine that I was in school with, were very amenable to that. They were very cool with that. So what to call it? And I was also writing a long, long story, my magnum opus. Still not written yet, but it will be. Right, we're back to it. Right,
we're pushing on it.
We have a target date in mind out in the future that we're going to release it. I don't know about calling it a trilogy, but it's 3 books worth of. It's a George Martin length story, whatever. It takes place in Phelan, and it centers around activities that require the protagonist to make an artifact, a legendary artifact, level weapon to battle the bad guys, that the English name is Brightsword. But here's a little tweak on that. It's also a Tolkien quote. Right? I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness.
Right.
The arrow for its swiftness, the warrior for its glory. I love that which it defends. And something like that.
Right.
And that was always stuck in my head. So it's kind of a coincidence. Brandywine, Brandywine, I'm a Tolkienite from way back. So it's both. And so the story will have the bright sword in it, this huge artifact.
Right.
But, and the story's called The Bright Sword War. But it's about the people. That's the thing. And so that's what we put on the original cover back in the 80s. And it's been called it ever since.
And that's our role-playing game.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Been a few versions.
Maybe a couple. All right. Well, we're about to close it out here.
Right.
Great stuff. I love hearing about the history of the company, because now that I'm involved in it, obviously, that's the roots. And we hold true to a lot of that, and we keep expanding, and it's a beautiful thing. So there's lots more to come, folks. Lots more to come.
And where do we want them to put suggestions for what subjects they would like to hear about? A Discord somewhere?
We're gonna have a Discord channel,
Sleeping Grush,
for the Sleeping Grush podcast, and also wherever you hear this, there's going to be a chance to leave comments on it. And you're going to be able to connect with it. Right. Everywhere, which is amazing, right? So leave those, and we'll make sure that we're monitoring those regularly. So if you want to hear something here on the podcast, you want to know some aspect of DGS or of Free Blades or of Brightsword, let us know, because we're going to be doing this a lot, and we want to. The
more you give us to do, the more often we're going to do it.
The more often we're going to do it, right? And we want to make it worthwhile. We want to do something here.
Have guests, add video.
Yeah. We're gonna
Dancing Bear Mystics. Wait, no, we're not there.
We have the Dancing Bear Mystic here on the table, but nobody can see it.
Nobody
but
can
us,
see her. Yeah.
Right? Gosh. But before we go, let's talk a little bit about some upcoming events for DGS Games. One of the big ones that we're looking at for the fall is Mid-MittenCon. It is in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and that is put on by a couple of our folks that are in the company, Jeff Wing and Colin, and they are sponsoring that, and they've put it together up there, and it's going to be a great weekend. That's November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and there's going to be the national tournament up there. There's going to be Brightsword games all weekend. There's going to be Encounter games all weekend. There's going to be Free Blades.
Is there a Master Crafter?
There is a Master Crafter competition going on.
So hobbyists also have.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be great. We already know that a lot of folk are coming from out of town, and we're really looking forward to that. That's a big national level event. Of course, we're looking forward to Adepticon and all that next year, but in the meantime, we're focusing on Mid-Mitten. It's going to be a fantastic event.
Let me add a couple others.
Yeah.
Just briefly, we'll touch on them. Over the course of the next couple of months, we'll also have presence at Audrey Nethery DBA, a charity event, gaming event in Kentucky, for a wonderful young lady named Audrey Nethery, who's a friend of ours. Griffin's Lair in Pennsylvania.
Griffin's Lair, yep. Going to do a game day out there.
I was going to say happens to be on the weekend of a Pittsburgh Steelers home game.
I don't know how that happened.
Just crazy. Gamescape in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's a really big thing coming up. Gamescape is going to be featuring Free Blades and Brightsword products, DGS games, throughout the month of December. And John and Julie are going to head out there and work with the
We're eventually
store.
going to see me and Sergio's conversation we recorded at Gen Con.
Yes, which is going to be awesome.
Done,
yeah, so we'll point you to that when it comes out, because that was a really cool little part of Gen Con that we did.
And then a return to the Las Vegas Open in January.
Which is going to be awesome. It's been a couple of years since we've been out there. It's been pre-COVID since we were out there. I believe it was 2019. 2018? No, it's 2019.
I'd have to ask Julie. Yeah, she'd know. Before COVID.
Before COVID. It was pre-COVID. So a lot going on out there, folks. Make sure that you subscribe to our different social media pages. Facebook's going to keep you updated on that. There's DGS Games, of course, but Free Blades Players is where everybody hangs out. And then, of course, the World of Phalon Discord, which is where all of the action's happening. Lots of different channels you can get yourself involved in, the hobby side, the game side.
Regional,
yeah.
We find your region. If you don't, we'll make you one.
Just added these regional chat rooms where you can get games going with other folks in your region, which is an awesome thing. That's been very, very helpful. So folks, we'll see you next time. Until then, we'll see you around the table.
Spike and win.